Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Please do be seated. Please take your seats. Taleb Rifai, ministers, distinguished guests and colleagues, a very warm welcome to World Travel Market's 7th Ministers' Summit in association with the United Nations World Tourism Organization. I'm Simon Press, the Senior Exhibition Director for World Travel Market. I'm delighted that for a 4th year running, this summit has brought together both private and public sectors, which, in my view, is absolutely fundamental to delivering real change within the industry. WTM 2013 will help to facilitate more than £2 billion worth of travel and tourism industry business, as around 50,000 senior industry professionals attend the event over the 4 days, agreeing deals that do their bit to increase the scope and size of the industry. Furthermore, 2013 will follow last year in seeing more than 1 billion trips being taken globally by travellers. Both of these facts show the industry should be optimistic of its prospects, despite the still unsure trade conditions hanging over many countries due to the recent global economic problems. However, all the contracts signed and the extensive business conversations had at World Travel Market this week, and the clear global enthusiasm for travel and tourism could be put at risk if today's topic of debate and discussion, how to bridge the gap between tourism and aviation policies, is not addressed. The global travel and tourism industry must come together and speak with one voice and work together to achieve common objectives for the benefit of us all. And I'm proud that World Travel Market is once again able to facilitate these necessary discussions and understanding. The aim of this summit is for productive industry dialogue. I genuinely believe that the public and private sectors have much more to give and to achieve, but only in close, insightful cooperation. With that in mind, it's firstly great to see so many ministers attend the summit. I understand this is one of the largest gathering of ministers in the world. We have more than 150 tourism ministers and their aides registered for the event this week. Furthermore, it's great to have so many of the travel industry's most senior private sector executives, especially from the aviation industry, with representation from IATA and also Amadeus. We all know the vital role the GDSs play in the sale of airline routes, and this perspective on joined-up aviation and tourism thinking will be vital. Last but not least, I'm delighted to see the packed room of delegates in front of me. This, to me, demonstrates the importance, but also the potential power of this summit. Ladies and gentlemen, it leaves me to wish you all a constructive summit here today, and I look forward with Taleb Rifai of the UNWTO to seeing many of you again this evening at the ministerial dinner just over the river, Thames, in the Cutty Sark. Thank you, and enjoy a constructive debate. Mr. Rifai.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's great to work with you and your team, and thank you all for being with us this lovely morning. Your Royal Highness, it's a great pleasure and it's an honor to have you with us. Baroness Morris, it's always a pleasure to see you here. Dear ministers, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could mention you each one by one. Good friends, wonderful professionals, and very, very good extended family. Charles, our cooperation with CNN has been exemplary. Last year, you did great. When you do well, you pay the price. So you come again and again and again. My dear friends, dear press, invitees, welcome to the 7th UNWTO WTM Ministerial Summit. This has become an event that everybody looks forward to. When we first started 7 years ago, it was difficult to try and recruit some of you to be speakers. Today, we feel very embarrassed when we tell some of you, please, can we do it next year or the year after? So please forgive us. We're all becoming so good at being well and connecting with each other, and we're doing a great job, all of us together, and we're very happy to see all of you here today with us. In the last couple of years, dear friends, ministers, visas and entry formalities and the existing procedures to obtain them were identified as a major barrier in front of healthier growth, otherwise, of tourism. Today, although much remains to be done, we can say that we have managed to place the topic of visas, travel facilitations, and entry formalities on the table. APEC, ASEAN, OECD, World Economic Forum, the European Union, the United States, and many, many other countries have done great progress. Only yesterday, the ministers of the G20 economies met to debate and discuss all of that, and to capitalize on the good achievements that was done last year at the meeting in Mexico, where the leaders of the most powerful economies of the world said, and I quote, "We should all work towards developing travel facilitation initiatives in support of job creation, quality work, poverty reduction, and global growth," unquote. All of this made us think that we should now start to expand our agenda and look into the bigger picture of what needs to be done. We need to continue building on the progress that we are doing on many issues, such as visas and entry formalities, but it is the political will that was generated and the political atmosphere that was created as a result of our collective work that encouraged us to expand our agenda. The fact that we have clearly advanced in this area is no reason for us to decrease our efforts in it. On the contrary, it is a stimulus to look beyond, and that's exactly what we're doing today. We're looking beyond entry formalities into the broader concept of travel facilitation and connectivity in particular. We cannot promote destinations. We cannot tell people it's beautiful to come to our countries when they can't physically come to your countries because of complicated, expensive, and cumbersome connections, and particularly air connections. It's against all the challenges and the odds that our industry has grown. But our industry has grown, so has the transport industry, and particularly the aviation industry. Let me share with you very quickly some of the results of the first 8 months of 2013. In the first 8 months of 2013, we exceeded all expectations globally and growing by 5.1%. We have forecasted at UNWTO at the beginning of this year that we will grow between 3 to 4%. We will definitely be closing the year over 4%. For the next 4 years, and I'm announcing this here firsthand, without very firm commitment, we are also expecting in 2014 another 4% growth, which puts us way above the 3.3% year-on-year growth that we are forecasting between now and 2030. But coming to what brings us here together, we must realize that over half of those, 52 to 55% of world travelers, arrive to their destinations by air. Our destinies are linked, the tourism industry and the aviation industry. But despite these clear linkages between tourism and aviation, these seems to be like unknown siblings that don't talk to each other the way they should and tend to operate in silos. We cannot actually continue to operate in this manner, and we need to bring these two industries together. Last year, we did a small experiment, a very important breakthrough, again together with the people here at Reed Exhibition. At the Arabian travel market, with the presence of His Royal Highness, who delivered a brilliant intervention at that time. The ministers at ATM, the Arab Travel Market, started to debate the issue of connection between tourism and aviation. And we decided that so much has come out and transpired out of that event that we need to bring it to this bigger audience. This is the biggest ever assembled ministerial roundtable that we've had here in London. And it is indeed, Simon, as you correctly said, probably the biggest gathering of ministers of tourism of the world. I must say, I would take an exception with our General Assembly because it's our General Assembly, nothing more. Let me, in that regard, just conclude by 3 thoughts that we need to put on the table, and I hope you will be considering them, and I invite Charles to take some note of them. Maybe they would help to promote the debate. First, economic regulations are very important. By economic, I mean the regulatory framework that connects to the economic situation are very central to the issue of aviation and tourism. Studies from the World Bank have shown that connectivity in all its aspects is closely correlated with the important economic variables, including the degree of liberalization of air transport, which is at the core of all of that. Much work has been worked and advanced on the trade part, but not on the passengers part. Minister Marie Pangestu, with us here, a former trade minister of Indonesia who is now a tourism minister of Indonesia, can shed some light on that and can show that the connection and the progress that has been done in connectivity with regard to trade can be emulated and can be used successfully when it comes to transporting people, which is what tourism is all about. Yet, in spite of that, reciprocity seems to dominate the scene. You do this to me, I do this to you. Reciprocity to us is like the concept of an eye for an eye. And I'm sorry to say that an eye for an eye would end up turning the whole world blind. We need to go beyond this concept and look at what really is of our interest. Second, taxations. While taxes are fundamental and legitimate tools for government, we must, as an industry, and I must repeat this again, we must pay our dues to our community, to our society, to our people. Air transport and tourism are legitimate industries to be taxed. But what kind of taxes? How intelligent are these taxes? We need to distinguish between legitimate, fair taxes and taxes that create distortions to the market. Taxes on aviation in particular are becoming extremely prohibitive and completely unintelligent, just to be polite about describing some of these taxes. 3, the concept of travel facilitation must be more broad and encompassing. Yesterday, a few ministers from Indonesia, Mexico, South Africa, and many others in our G20 meeting yesterday pointed out that we must look at the broader picture of travel facilitation and see not only the issue of how complicated it is to get a visa or how complicated it is to arrive to a place, but what happens after we arrive. Are our airports friendly enough? How long does it take between when a plane lands until I take a taxi outside of the airport facilities? How complicated, how interrogative are the officers in the airports, and how friendly, how human, and how pleasant does the travel experience start from airport or ends at any airport? These 3 issues, the economic regulation, the taxation, and the broader concept of travel facilitation are issues that I would be very, very thankful if we can shed some light on during your debates. My dear friends, today we initiate an important process. We will continue working on it. Just as we achieved great progress on the issues of visas, we will achieve more progress on the issue of aviation and its connection to tourism. I'm particularly delighted to see here with us very high representation from our sister organization, ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the United Nations organization mandated for travel by air. And I'm sure that we will be hearing the other side of the story just as equal as we hear the side from the tourism perspective. We will surely make our case stronger if we speak as one on the benefits of connectivity, on the harmfulness of taxes, and the usefulness of visa and travel facilitations. UNWTO will continue to be committed. Our work with WTTC, our sister organization as I call it, the organization that represents the private sector, has been exemplary. We've produced some excellent research together. We're doing advocacy together, and I'm very happy and proud to have my half-brother, as he likes to call himself, David Scousel, here with us, and I'm sure that he can shed some light also on some of what we've been doing together. Ladies and gentlemen, with these thoughts, I wish you all the best, and I invite you to be honest, frank, open, and let's make this the beginning of an issue that we can come in 2 to 3 years to proudly say it all started here in November 2013 with you being part of it, participating. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I'm just going to stand up for a moment, but forgive me if I conduct the rest of the session sitting down. And I'm going to apologize in advance for any breaches of protocol. But let's hope I get the opening right. Your Royal Highness, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, well, welcome. It's always great to be in this particular forum because I'm reminded of how much you know about this business from all of your different perspectives. You've all come from different geographies, you all bring different skills and experiences to the party, and yet I sense that there is a great sense of purpose here, a great sense of understanding of what it will take to move this business forward. There is a great sense of how important it is to move the business forward because of the benefits in terms of economic well-being, but also in terms of understanding of humanity, of leading our lives to their great fullness, to the fullness of their potential, understanding this wonderful world in which we live by visiting some of its most fascinating places. Now, it's customary for whoever is moderating an event like this to introduce the panelists, but rather than have me struggle with your names, I wonder if I could ask you to introduce each of yourselves. If I could start with you, Your Royal Highness, if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and your title and, you know, or at least a summary of your many titles, and just 2 or 3 little things about yourself.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sultan bin Salman bin Abdulaziz. I'm the Standing Minister of Tourism in Saudi Arabia, the Chairman of the Saudi Commission for Tourism and Antiquities and Culture. And I'm here to learn from the group, and I've also served as a member of the Civil Aviation Commission, JACA.
And you're a pilot yourself. You flew only yesterday.
I'm an aviator myself,
yes.
So I can speak with some authority today.
Thank you. Martinez.
Martinez van Schalkwijk, South African Tourism Minister.
Isabel Borrego, Secretaria de Estado de Turismo de España.
From Spain. Nice to have you with us.
And from Portugal, Adolfo Mesquita Nunes, Secretary of State for Tourism.
Okay, no quarreling over there.
No. We had a peace agreement.
You received your independence only by accident.
I'm their neighbor too. I'm Lahsan Haddad from Morocco.
That's right, yes. There's a kind of corner there.
That's right.
I'm from considerably farther away. I'm Ramon Jimenez, Tourism Secretary for the Philippines.
Good morning, Beverly Nicholson Doty, Chairman of the Caribbean Tourism Organization.
And you're from the U.S. Virgin Islands?
I am.
And you're the Honorable Minister for Tourism
Tourism,
there.
yes.
Good to have you with us.
Good morning, Boubacar Djibo. I'm the Director of the Air Transport Bureau of the International Civil Aviation Organization. I think the closest sister organization of UNWTO.
Okay.
I'm Sven Lervag. I'm Vice President Industry Affairs of Amadeus IT Group.
And just remind us what Amadeus is.
Amadeus is an IT company. We do 2 things. We provide what's called, well, normally referred to as a GDS. We provide a market platform where we connect airlines and other travel providers with the sellers of travel agencies, whether they are TMCs or online players in the market. And the second thing we do is we power an increasing share of the airline industry's internal systems, anything from their revenue management and image control system to departure control and the like.
So you're the brains and the metrics.
Your words.
All right, okay. We'll explore that later.
Fadi Aboud, Minister for Tourism from the Lebanon.
Okay, thank you.
Rafael Schwartzman, I'm the Regional Vice President for IATA in Europe.
Okay, remind us again, how would you characterize IATA?
Well, IATA is a trade body, the International Air Transport Association, which represents 240 airlines and the air transport industry across the globe.
Mari Pangestu, Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy from Indonesia.
Alexander Radkov, Federal Agency for Tourism of Russia.
And you've got a big event coming up?
Yeah.
Tell us about your hard work.
Но я буду так говорить по-русски.
Please.
Yeah.
Just very briefly.
Yeah.
Немножко, только немножко.
Федеральное агентство по туризму, орган государственной власти, который координирует работу туристического бизнеса и туристического рынка в Российской Федерации.
I was thinking about Sochi.
Сочи. Но Сочи, конечно, все в предвкушении Олимпиады, все готовимся, в том числе и Федеральное агентство по туризму вплотную занимается этой темой размещения гостей Олимпиады.
Good. Thank you, and of course that has helped us all us English speakers, find our headphones and find channel 1 if you're in English, and I think they're up there, aren't they? Yes.
I'm Claudia Ruiz Macié. I'm the Secretary of Tourism from Mexico.
What's your background? What were you doing before you became a minister nearly a year ago?
Well, I was in Congress for 2 terms, and I also I worked at the Attorney General's office in Mexico. So okay. I'm a professional politician, like many of my colleagues.
Thank you.
I'm also the good twin with the transportation minister.
Okay.
He's evil twin.
Well, that I think you've touched on a point that I'm sure we're going to return to later on in our discussions. Thank you, Minister. Your Excellency.
David Scousill, President and CEO of the World Travel and Tourism Council, here representing the private sector.
Thank you very much. I'm also grateful to you, Talib, for very kindly laying out the intellectual groundwork here. And I do try to come here with a degree of humility, because I know that your industry is not only growing very fast, as Talib reminded us, but also has big things in its sights for 2030. And the hope is, of course, as I'm sure you realize, if you've read the WTO research material, that there is the potential for 1.8 billion international tourists in the year 2030. And one of the things that I hope that we will leave this room understanding better is what it will take to achieve that goal. Are we going to make it? What does it depend on? But I'd like to turn to you first briefly, David, just to tell us from a commercial perspective, to give us a little bit more of the feel behind the numbers that Talib very kindly gave us about growth. How do you see the way that we've moved in the last 6 to 12 months in terms of moving the tourism and travel and the interlinking agenda forward?
Well, just very briefly in numbers terms, as Talib described, the industry is growing ahead of the global economy. It's very resilient. So we're dealing with a very robust industry in totality. If we look back over the last 6 to 12 months, I think we've made huge progress as an industry down a path of getting everybody to talk about the same issues. So we have a global association of industry associations now, where between us, with the UNWTO, with IATA, with ICAO, with PATA and WEF, we focus the entire industry on 4 issues: travel facilitation, visas, taxation, sustainability, and connectivity. And I think with the issue of visas, following from what happened with the G20 meeting in Los Cabos last year, we've made tremendous progress, but there's more to go. With the issues of taxation and infrastructure build, and doing that in a sustainable way, we have a way to go. And I think if there's one challenge that we all have collectively in this discussion, it's how to bring together within a government tourism and aviation, but not just those particular ministries or focuses. It has to be wider into finance and interior ministries. So one of the things I'd like to plant on the table for discussion is how we better achieve that. Because when Talib and I go to see heads of state, it's pretty typical that they're still relatively ignorant about our industry. And I'm going to talk about Mexico in a second, because I think what the Minister has created in Mexico is one example of how governments could get their act together better.
Let's come to the Honourable Minister from Mexico in a moment on that issue. But thank you for laying that out, because I think that is actually a very important theme, sort of cross-theme, if you like, throughout this morning's discussions. I hope it will be. And that is, how do you get tourism, exchequer, finance, travel, for taxation? How do you get home security, in terms of visa facilitation and that issue which is, counter-terrorism, very important issue, kind of a bit of an elephant in the room here. And of course, travel and responsibility for aviation. How do you interweave those in such a way that economies benefit and tourists benefit? In terms of the major themes that I want to discuss, I'm again very, very grateful to you, Taleb, for the way that you characterize things. And for your 3 items of agenda, if you like. But I think I just want, because I know that visas have been an important discussion at the T20, the G20 tourism ministers. You met yesterday, I believe, and I think it's important that we pick up the agenda that you have set us. I'd like to talk about visas to start off with for until about 5 or 10 past 12. And then I think I'd like to move on to some of the broader issues, the economic regulation or deregulation that Taleb put there, and also these issues of tax and perhaps some of the other travel facilitation issues. But I think I'd like to have a decent focus on visas, if we could start off with, please. So, Your Royal Highness, could you perhaps talk to us a little bit about how you see this issue of visas and whether you feel that it's important, and how it interweaves with some of the other issues that we've touched on in the last few minutes?
Well, we in Saudi Arabia separate between visas and processing visas for everyone else, and our agenda for bringing in tourists in mass numbers to Saudi Arabia. We have made quite a bit of strides, I think, in processing visas in terms of electronic visas. Very, very smart system of producing visas. Private sector companies today are in charge of producing visas all over the world. And we have issued, last year only, 10.5 million visas in Saudi Arabia, which amounts to about half of the population of Saudi Arabia. It's a big number. And of course, we do process a large number of people coming to Saudi Arabia for the religious sites. So practically over 7 million people coming in last year. Therefore, also visa restrictions have been lifted within the Gulf countries. As you know, people of the Gulf countries come in without visas in Saudi Arabia. And visitors are still coming to Saudi Arabia. We're not ready yet to bring in tourism for the main reason, as I mentioned yesterday, we have a big market that's seeping out of our country. Our own people are big spenders and very important tourists worldwide. They're sought after by many of the countries that are here, my friends, the ministers of Morocco, Lebanon, and other countries. And we want to capture that market. We want to bring that market home. And we're making a lot of inroads into those numbers as we went the last 5 years. At the same time, we have opened up now to more than 65 countries. People are coming for religious purposes to stay in Saudi Arabia. People from Indonesia, people from other countries, from United States, from United Kingdom, Muslims who come for the religious stuff. That we now will let them stay for over a month in Saudi and tour the country. Our system of tour operators and our destinations are not really ready yet to absorb this impact. We're investing in Saudi Arabia huge amounts of money to develop the system of tourism in the country. So the visa openness is coming as we go gradually, but Saudi Arabia is really not a closed country to say so.
Okay, fascinating. And there's a statistic for us, a country which issues the same number of visas equivalent to half its population, 10.5 million, out of a population of 20-odd million in Saudi Arabia, isn't it? Let me come to you, Honourable Minister from Spain. Where do you see the scope for improvement in this issue of visas? Because I think that let's look straight into the future now.
El futuro es difícil de predecir, pero es verdad que las previsiones que tiene la OMT de 1.800 millones de turistas a lo largo del mundo sí que se podrán cumplir. La política de visados para España se ha convertido en política turística en mayúsculas. De hecho, en el último año ha habido un incremento del número de visados de un 22%, pero lo que creo que es más importante, ha habido una reducción de casi un 40% en la tasa de denegación de visados, que eso yo creo que es más importante quizá que el número de visados que se conceden. Pero por una parte es la emisión de visados, pero uniendo con una cosa que ha dicho el secretario general al principio en su intervención, no solo es importante la emisión de visados, sino la siguiente fase, la comprobación y el control de esos visados, la entrada a nuestros países. Eso sí que tiene un aspecto muy negativo en la imagen de nuestros países, en el inicio de esa experiencia del viaje, y yo creo que tenemos que controlar no solo la emisión del visado, sino también el control y la comprobación de esos visados, y creo que son clave para una industria económica como es el turismo, pero una industria que intentamos que sea una industria amable por el objetivo final del viaje.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much. Okay, does anyone, another one of the panelists want to come in on visas, and particularly where, perhaps pinpoint a specific area where there is scope for improvement and a real prospect of improvement? Honourable Minister from South Africa.
Charles, the Secretary-General reported back that we've made some progress. And yesterday at our G20 meeting, there was a report from UNWTO that in 2008, destinations required from 77% of the world's population traditional visas. In just 5 years, it's down to 64%. Now, 2 years ago when we had this panel discussion, some of us predicted that within 5 to 8 years, e-visas would have won the day. And I'm quite willing to make a very bold prediction that in 5 years from now on, there will be universal uptake of E and M visas, and countries without E and M visas will be the exception.
We're talking about only about 3% at the moment of all visas are e-visas. Is that roughly the right number at the moment?
In operation, yes. And
yes,
a number of countries like India has announced...
So it's a big prediction you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we've won the economic argument already, the technological argument. The only argument that we as tourism ministers must still win is the security argument. And we're almost there. There's a very interesting pilot project in the United States where people can now log in from wherever they are in the world. Their fingerprints can be taken on screen. Retina recognition is part of the security features. And I have no doubt that we're almost there, winning the security argument as well.
Yeah, if we can all have smartphones, or very large numbers, then e-visas shouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah, look what is happening in Africa as our continent on the uptake of mobile phones.
So clearly a lot of momentum there. Sven Møreborg, if I could come to you, from the point of view of Amadeus, have you noticed things change as visas have become dramatically easier to obtain over the past few years?
No, I don't think we can say there's any dramatic change. What we're still working with IATA and others to achieve, and we're working also with the WTTC, is to see what types of standard processes can be put in place and how can you facilitate how visas are being issued, how you involve the trade, make it simple, because it's still a long way to go before adoption is ripe. But we try to contribute as much as we can to enable that to happen.
Mr. Larberg, thank you. Honourable Minister from Morocco.
I just want to add that for us in Morocco, one of the things that we have done in order to improve actually the visa is like we adopt a principle of no reciprocity. So there are like countries which issue visas for Moroccans. We don't do the same. So that's something that because we do it on our own and then we look at it from our, I mean like from a tourism perspective. The other thing is like we adopted a flexible kind of approach to visas. So there are countries in which we lift visas. There are countries which we issue visa, but it is at the border. There are visas which are given like at groups. And I think being flexible in those kinds of areas will help also the security authorities to deal with this kind with visas. But I think that the technology. The issue of e-visas is very, very important. It's going to help. It's going to help because it's going to reduce a lot of the security problems that we're dealing with. Because there is Minister of Interior, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that need also to have their say about whether we lift a visa or we do like we ease a visa for a country. But if there is like e-visas and there is control before landing, and also there is like a lot of use of technology for processing luggage and processing also like the biometric history of a lot of travelers that will help like with first the reception of tourists at the airports, but the second thing is like will alleviate a lot of the fears from the security people about like people traveling. So I think there is a lot of work to be done on the technology level, but also, I mean, I think with the approach to visas and how you don't have to have just one standard in terms of policy about visa and how you deal with people coming to your country.
Okay, would anyone else like, yes, Honourable Minister from Lebanon, yeah, and then
if I may, I would like to give a real-life example. We abolished visas between Lebanon and Turkey a few years ago. And within 3 years, the numbers were multiplied by 10. So 10 times more people were visiting Turkey from Lebanon and vice versa. So this will give an idea on how important it is for, ease of travel. Because now, visas can take a long, long time in some countries, and travelers are simply not interested in destinations where they have to wait a couple of weeks to get a visa.
And where there's a lot of hassle and where they have to answer a lot of questions and go to an interview. That can be quite difficult. I know I'm very interested in calling you Honourable Minister from Indonesia because I know that Southeast Asia is actually one of the areas where, according to the research from the WTO, visas are, if you like, easiest. You actually have a great deal of connectivity in terms of, I'm trying to remember what exactly the metric is that's used, but I know that there is a measure which shows you as perhaps one of the regions which is easiest to travel in from a visa point of view.
Yeah, I was just going to add to this discussion that the economic argument, I think we've won. Technology is the answer. And I'm quite optimistic, like Martinez is, that that's the future. But how do you get there? I think phase by phase, and regional agreements are a very important way to get to it. So in ASEAN, for instance, within ASEAN countries, we are already visa-free. And I know in Latin America, they're also experimenting with, sub-regions being visa-free. And then we're also going to try to adopt ASEAN Common Visa, which means that you can enter any one of the ASEAN countries and then not need a visa if you visit any other country. And then within our region, we also have APEC, which is the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. Once again, do it on a regional basis. You start with a few countries. And it's about systems at the end of the day, sharing data and systems. So you start bilaterally or with a few countries with the hope that, it expands wider. And I think that's the way to go. So we are trying to encourage as many regions to do similar things. And ASEAN and APEC being examples of where we've tried to do that. There's a good example is the APEC business mobility card, business travel card, which is now basically if you have that card, you being defined as a business person, you can go visa-free to, I think, 19 economies now, and there's a special APEC lane. What we would like to have as tourism ministries is obviously a similar program, a trusted traveler program, which would have the same kind of effect. You have this card, you can go visa-free to any of these APEC economies, you have a special lane, and that's part of fast and secure travel.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's, if you like, a vision of the future I know for many people sitting in this room. I wonder if I could come to you, Honourable Minister, for Russia. What are your thoughts as you listen to your neighbour speaking so enthusiastically about the benefits of not having too many visa regulations? Because historically, I think Russia has generally had visas, but of course you're now looking at more flexible ones for Sochi.
Безусловно, тема виз, она всегда балансирует между принципом взаимности и экономическими интересами. И всегда нужно выбирать какую-то золотую середину. Для России при ее существенном туристическом потенциале ежегодно 48 миллионов поездок российских граждан за рубеж и 28 миллионов прибытий. И, конечно же, туристические обмены большей частью, более 70%, осуществляются со странами, с которыми нет визовых отношений, визового режима. Это специфика России, потому что Россия, во-первых, очень большая по территории страна. И 9 часовых поясов. Для того, чтобы просто добраться до какого-то визового центра, нужно затратить достаточно большие средства. Вторая специфика российского рынка в том, что туристы заранее не планируют поездки, как правило. Они выбирают туры за 2-3 недели до поездки. И, безусловно, выбор делается в пользу тех стран, с которыми нет визовых режимов. Поэтому, конечно же, процесс облегчения визового режима – это тот вектор, в котором мы должны двигаться. И здесь мы находимся в постоянном переговорном процессе с Евросоюзом по поводу облегчения визовых режимов и перспективе отмены визовых режимов, потому что Россия неоднократно заявляла, что в принципе мы не видим никаких препятствий к тому, чтобы отменить визовый режим, допустим, со странами Евросоюза. Уже в настоящее время мы планируем сделать безвизовый транзит для тех авиапассажиров, которые прилетают в крупные международные аэропорты России на 72 часа. И этот законопроект уже прошел слушание в первом чтении в парламенте. Я думаю, в следующем году эта норма уже начнет действовать. И кроме этого, я думаю, что здесь было бы очень эффективно использовать различные механизмы создания зеленых безвизовых коридоров для туристических обменов. Допустим, у нас с Китаем есть визовый режим, но есть соглашение, в соответствии с которым туристические поездки групповые, где группа 5 человек и больше, осуществляется без виз. Вот такого рода регуляторы, их, мне кажется, тоже эффективно использовать в туристических обменах с всеми странами, пока еще где визовые режимы сохраняются.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, Minister from the US Virgin Islands.
As representing the Caribbean Tourism Organization, this is a very important issue for us because you look at in excess of 30 countries that are, or territories that are members, and you have different political statuses ranging from French territories to U.S. territories to independent countries. And as we look at the visa issue, one of the things that I think Talib says so well is developing the coalition of the willing. And how do we have those subgroupings where we can adopt regulatory policies that allow for some commonality? And I think that that's an interesting way of looking as we go forward, because getting consensus against 30 countries with varying or destinations with varying political structure may be challenging to get all at one time. But how can we get groups, perhaps the OECS or CARICOM, and looking at how we can get commonality in terms of the policy? And we know that there is a structure for this because we were able to do it with World Cup cricket. So we know that there's a format, and it's the will to get us together in that way.
Yes, that word commonality is an interesting one, isn't it? It's kind of the stage beyond reciprocity. I mean, Talib was saying, we need to go beyond reciprocity, and that is, it seems to me, the first step into the future. Yes, Honourable Minister from Portugal.
I pretty much agree with what is being said about technology, but I would like to share with you some difficulties on the way. First, we need to train our people in the embassies outside. We have the same rules in the European Union, and we have different records. Some countries are much easier in issuing visas, others are not. So this is not just a question of rules, it's a question of understanding how tourism is important in the visa issuance. So we are training and we are giving a new vision to our diplomats on what's regarding the visa issues, because we have different countries with the same rules issuing visas with much more easiness than the others. Also is that we have a strong liaison between the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Tourism Ministry. Why? Because we are trying to point specific countries where we are trying to focus on, like Russia, for instance, and we are having new technologies there, or contracting third parties to issue the visas, and we double the visas issued. We are trying to do that slowly because it's not, although we all agree here that, okay, visa is a touristic issue and let's move on. Of course, we have the resistance at home of the other ministries that are afraid of immigration and all the issues there. So we are pointing out some countries where we are focusing on and trying to prove our case and to build our case. And I think that the Russian case, in what concerns Portugal, and the record we are having since we started the new regime, has proved correctly. And and we also have like a risk cabinet. I mean, every time we have travel agencies or operators having problems in specific countries with the visas, we act immediately. So we have a monthly liaison between our two ministries. Just apart from the ideas of technology that I, of course, share, and the idea of the easiness that also in European Union and Schengen area we should plenty of work to do yet. I think that we should not be happy.
Yeah. Can we just have, if we could just be brief, I'm sorry, I think we're just going to have one intervention for each theme, I'm afraid, per minister. Forgive me.
Yes, I actually agree with what my colleagues have been saying. I just want to say something. Mexico has one of the most progressive policies regarding visas, and I like to say it works. We have waived visa requirements with many countries, depending on whether they are our business partners or they're part of an economic region or regarding country of residence. It works. It works for tourism. But I think what we should focus in terms of what's coming in the future is better use of technology, definitely, and that's going to help us win the security argument, like Martina said. And also I think the future is going to bring, and we're seeing it now in a way, a different approach to visas. It has to do with, for once, what system are you part of, such as are you part of an economic region, and that's going to change the way we give or not give visas, and what kind of people are you in terms of what you do, what's your occupation. You're a business traveler, you're going to have an easier time getting a visa, and why not? We may see in the future visa waivers for people that are over 70 or for people that have another condition. So I think the future is going to bring a much better use of technology, but also a different approach other than nationality only for the types of visa requirements we have.
Okay, Minister, thank you. I'm afraid we're just going to have to move on. Can I just take one or two interventions from the floor, just quite briefly? Gentleman over here with the red tie.
Thank you very much, sir.
Minister.
Minister from the Seychelles.
Thank you, Minister from the Seychelles.
I wanted to support what the Minister from South Africa said. I think already he's brought out that there is a way forward that we look at. And I can echo from the Seychelles, as small as we are, how important it is to have no visa. Seychelles has a no visa policy whatsoever. We are friends of all and enemies of none. So we welcome everybody to Seychelles. But I can say whenever there is a feast, like there was Eid or Diwali just recently, we get so many people that are looking for very short destination moves to go on holiday, and they choose Seychelles, primarily because there's no visa. They know they can land at any time. So what Minister van Schalbecker said, it is so important to know that in the future, the world is looking at simplifying the approach, because we know that this will help tourism in the long term.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Intervention perhaps from anyone else? Otherwise, I'm going to just move on. Sven, go ahead.
One thing. One of the topic of this discussion is how you bridge the gap between the aviation industry and tourism in general. This is an area where you should learn from the aviation industry, from the airline industry. I've been in the travel industry for 25 years, and if it hadn't been for the standardization, speaking of commonality, in the airline industry, it would look very, very much different today, and we wouldn't be where we are in terms of global connectivity. Okay. So this is an area where you could really learn from the aviation industry, standardize and make common solutions using technology.
All right. Honourable Minister from Spain, perhaps since we don't have too much enthusiasm from the floor for speaking, I know that you wanted to say something. If you could be brief, please.
Solo antes hemos comentado que tenemos que trabajar a nivel regional y a nivel global y a nivel Unión Europea, los países que nos afecta. Y yo creo que tenemos que tener en cuenta el trabajo que se está haciendo por parte de la Comisión Europea y que ya está en el calendario de trabajo y saber este mes de diciembre que en lo que se refiere a modificación de todos los reglamentos, el tema de visados, y que tiene una especial significación en la modificación, en la revisión de la huella digital. Y también yo creo que tenemos que tener en cuenta y tenemos que hacer una autocrítica a todos los países que formamos parte de la Unión Europea y que a nivel Schengen, decir que tenemos que aplicar el código de visados plenamente. No todos lo estamos ejecutando plenamente. Primero tenemos que, antes de revisar las normas que están en vigor, ver si las que están en vigor todavía las podemos ejecutar hasta su máxima ejecución.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Just one input regarding the technology and the information. As you know, for historical reason, ICAO has taken the lead for what we call machine-readable travel document that all of you have on issue of processing of advanced information being APR, advanced passenger information, how we assess through the PKD. So from the discussion held between ICAO and UNWTO, we have agreed that the basic information and the basic procedure exists for passport. So what exists for passport can be, of course, translated for visas. And this is the new direction that we are taking with you to be sure that whatever is available will now fit in that new strategic vision of visa facilitation or separation of visa based on the technology, ABC, automated border control. A lot of systems exist already. It's a way now of implementing them and having an agreement at the appropriate level. Thank you.
Let's move on. Let's move on if we could, please, because I know that there's a tremendous amount to talk about. Let's move on to the issue of aviation. Now, again, the UNWTO's vision is of a world in which in 2030 there will be some 60 million aircraft departures, roughly double the fairly recent number of 30 million. And clearly that is dependent on a number of factors. And I'd like to ask you, Mr. Schwarzman, from the point of view of the air carriers, what is riding on all of this for you in IATA? How do you see the role of aviation both in driving the future and in serving the future of tourism?
Well, it was already highlighted. I mean, the growth that we're seeing today, it's already healthy compared to even with these restrictions, right? We are, of course, very concerned about how to handle this future growth, right? How to facilitate, as it was already mentioned as one of the key areas to focus on, how to facilitate the growth of the industry. And we have seen already that there are issues in capacity, right? I mean, capacity crunch, right? And there are lots of debates going on around, but no really tackling the capacity requirements to be able to sustain this growth, right? Maybe not only in capacity in an airport, but also in the air, right? Air traffic management, right? We have already an initiative in the EU, which is called the Single European Sky, that has been going on for many, many, many years, and it is the way to solve the future growth needs in air traffic management, for example. So in that area, we need to collaborate. There is a technology part to it. Of course, there are government parts to it. There are the airlines. So for facilitations, I mean, there are issues with capacity, which, again, as I said, is not only airports. It's also in the air. There are issues with, I would say, the whole facilitation process in an airport, right? Which includes also security, right? Yeah. A big area. If you want to be able to process faster the throughput of people in an airport, so you don't need to build bigger terminals, then we need to use technology to, of course, to better manage the infrastructure we have today. Otherwise, it's going to be a multiplying effect to build terminals that are, too expensive, right? So we have an initiative in IATA which is called Checkpoint of the Future, and I think Sven mentioned a little bit about the relevance of setting standards. So if we are able to set standards, we can drive this initiative worldwide. If we are not able to set these standards, then it's going to be very long discussions until we can actually come to an agreement. And that has been the successful of the industry, really. It worked, in a simple example, if you look at the e-ticket, right? Nobody questions the standard of the e-ticket, right? Nobody even thinks about today, how do you use an e-ticket, right? And that's one standard, and it's global. So I think that has to do, that's a big part, even in the previous conversation related to visas, but also on the infrastructure, because I mentioned the air traffic management is a big concern. You know, the number of aircraft the number of flights you just mentioned, how are we going to handle that without having to double or triple or quadruple the infrastructure in the air, and therefore the cost and the complexity to it?
There's a large number of fascinating issues that you've mentioned there, so I'm very grateful to you for that intervention. Perhaps we can tease some of them out with the help of some of the other panelists. I wonder if I could ask you, Honourable Minister from the Philippines, I mean, listening to this, how easy is it going to be to get progress on some of the issues that we've just been hearing about? E-tickets, yes. Obviously, that's good. That works yes. very, very well. But flow through airports, security, and above all, that dialogue between tourism and aviation and essentially the whole issue of regulation at governmental level.
You know, Charles, our experience in the Philippines, in fact, you know, hasn't always been, it's been quite a bumpy road. But I guess of late, you know, when you look at governance in general, you realize that a lot of the difficulties we go through are only because governments refuse to review what they're doing now. And I've been long enough in government, a very long time of 2 years. I spent most of my life in private business, realizing that government in many, many respects thinks that every decision it makes is irreversible, and that simply isn't true. The people who designed the e-ticket made tons of decisions before we have the e-ticket process we all respect today. If you look at visas or security procedures in airports, you will find that some of the most significant solutions were simply because we bothered to sit down and ask the right questions. For years after September 11, people were required to remove their shoes before going through the airport in Manila, until somebody said, "Why do we have to remove our shoes?" "Oh, sir, because the scanners don't go all the way down to the shoes." It took a 150 peso plywood box that you step on as you enter the scanner to scan all the way down to the shoes. You know that's, and I'm only half joking. You don't have to remove your shoes going through Manila Airport anymore, only because people thought that the rules couldn't change. Of course they change. And it requires a congruence of policy and point of view just to get there.
Okay, I wonder if any of our other panelists want to come in on that, this whole issue. Yes, Your Royal Highness.
Well, you can call me Captain now that we're talking about aviation. One of my favorite titles. Mostly, you know, I think the issue are two issues, governments and private sector. The e-visa issue was, or the e-ticketing was sorted out because it was a private sector issue, because it was a marketing issue. People want to buy airplanes, or want to sell airplanes, want to put more people into airplanes, want to deliver people. Then you get stuck in a bottleneck on the government side of the visas and for the security. And in Saudi Arabia, I ended up, part of my job as a member of the Aviation Commission of Saudi Arabia is literally managing to reinvent the Riyadh airport, the central capital airport. So for over 4 years, I practically lived half my time in the airport. Realized that it's quite a Goliath. I spend a lot more time in the government, and it's a lot longer time than I wanted to do. Is people are not trained, and we had to reinvent completely the airport to introduce it to become a corporation next year by training more than 2,500 people to literally become operational in terms of becoming people to people rather than government to people. So there is quite a bit of process. In Saudi Arabia today, we face a big challenge. We manage 27 airports. We have 6 underway, and we have more coming on stream. And the country has decided finally 2 years ago to to adopt a very open policy and liberalize the aviation sector. Open Skies, our national airline, the monopoly has been broken down now, about 50% into privatization. 3 of its 4 sectors are already been privatized. 8 new airlines are coming in from the Gulf and other countries that are now allowed to fly within Saudi Arabia. And we have opened up more than 8 airports to international flights and 12 more to come. And of course, we're expanding all the major 6 airports in Saudi, literally tripling their capacity. Riyadh Airport, the last plan I handed over, which has now been financed, will go from 12 million passengers to 30 million passengers over the next 6 years. So these are challenges that now have brought the government and the private sector together. I'm lucky in the sense I chair a commission that has 13 ministers on the board. So all my work is coordinated on a monthly basis, and of course the private sector also sits on our board.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Honourable Minister from South Africa.
You earlier said that by 2030 we will have 1 billion more travellers than we have at the moment. But there are 2 other very important projections that we should take our decisions on. The one is that in 1980 we had 6,000 city pair air services in the world, direct non-stop flights between cities in the world. Now we have 15,000, 2.5 times more. Airbus in their recent study said that the mega cities from 42 now will more than double in the next 20 years to 89, and that 99% of long-haul traffic will go through and will be between those hubs. Now, there are 2 dimensions for tourism ministers working together with our other colleagues. The one is the infrastructural one, and the other one is aviation. I want to talk about Chicago Convention. Let me maybe start with that. Chicago Convention was signed 60 years ago, 1947, when the world order was basically based on bilateralism, reciprocity. And we must find a way to get around Chicago Convention. Obviously, to renegotiate a new treaty will take us decades in the present world order. But isn't it just insane that we have all these global companies selling soda all over the world, auditing firms, legal firms? Boeing and Airbus are global companies. But once they start flying the planes, our airlines, it can only be on a bilateral basis. We must change that, ensure mobility of capital and take away ownership and control restrictions. And for us as governments, we should think very deeply about that issue. And then on the infrastructural issue, what do we have to do to build all these airports to accommodate all these new travelers and tourists? But not only hard infrastructure, also soft infrastructure, information systems, information security systems, human skills, etc. China recently said that they will build 82 new airports over the next decade and a half. So that is something that all of us must get our teeth into, is the infrastructural requirement of this increase in tourists.
Okay. Mr. Jibo.
Yes, thank you. Just following the Honourable
ICAO.
Minister of South Africa has touched, I think, a very important issue. How we perceive the freedom of the air or the open sky, or the way operators are free to move from one state to the other. So it's a difficult issue. It's true that formally, legally, Chicago Convention is founded on the bilaterals. But what is important is through the discussion that we have with the industry, with the stakeholder, we are trying to find a very practical solution, which will fit and is fitting you. We have what we call ICANN, which is International Conference on Air Negotiation. This year, this conference will be in Durban, South Africa in December, and next year it will be in Indonesia. And of course, we have submitted that idea to our colleagues from the tourism sector, and we have decided to join not only civil aviation people, but tourism people, to come together and to understand what should be the added value of aviation. I think that the issue that we have in aviation, we are speaking, coordinating in our world, looking at standards, but not touching the real world and the need of the end user, being cargo or being passenger. So we have a solution, and we have offered to UNWTO, WTTC, to do it jointly from now. Instead of leaving aviation people discussing of bilateral freedom, let's bring you at the highest level, and then we feel that the necessary openness will come. And then jointly we go together to Home Affairs, to Foreign Affairs, to be sure that what we have agreed and open will be implemented. So really, we have a solution for that.
But I think, that the Honourable Minister from South Africa put his finger on it when he said, a new treaty will take us decades. What the process that you're talking about is actually a big ask in real political terms, isn't it? I mean, that is going to take a lot of time, surely.
It's already why, because we bring the negotiator with full powers from the member state to agree to open. And of course, now we have the regional approach. The EU Commission is coming on behalf of the 27 member states to negotiate air traffic rights. We are bringing some African formal regional economic community like ECOWAS also who have the power to negotiate. So if we have the feedback of the industry, of those who are need to increase travel, I think it will go even faster. This year we have already 70 states have registered to be in South Africa to negotiate. Through your help, through your assistance, we can increase the participation. So it's concrete, and UNWTO will be present in that meeting to beginning assessing what we are doing. Already, Mr. Rifai has authorized his staff to be present. So we invite, of course, the member state to come along with their colleagues from civil aviation. And then all of us will talk with the industry, with the airports, to sustain efficiency, with the CRS, to be sure that the travelers can book. So this is what we offer to you.
Mr. Jibo, thank you very much indeed. Your neighbour, Honourable Minister from the US Virgin Islands.
This issue of aviation and getting back to the core, which is bridging the gap, I think one of the critical elements that we have to look at here is that aviation and tourism ministers are not often, they don't have the same portfolio. So there has to start to be a meaningful dialogue on a consistent basis between aviation and tourism because they are interdependent on each other. So and then it has to go out there from governments to the dialogue with the private sector. And I think that public-private sector partnership is extremely important. We can never, ever forget as we are bridging this gap that the consumer is king and that we seem to forget in all of our security discussions and our regulatory things. And while those are important, that we need to make sure that the experience is why people come to our region. And so those are all extremely very, very important. And we can't leave out of this discussion when we're talking about aviation. I know we're going to get to it, but taxation, because taxation is a critical element that chokes the lifeblood of your aviation systems and your tourism destinations.
Okay, we are going to come to taxation. I am going to do that next. Can I just come to you, Minister from Indonesia?
Yeah, coming from the trade world, multilateral negotiations on trade in services, including air transport, has been very difficult because it is always reciprocity oriented. So I think we need to make, again, the economic argument stronger about the benefits of opening up and its impact on not just tourism, but also trade and investment flows. And short of that, because it will take a long time to negotiate multilaterally, I think regional agreements is once again the answer. Like in ASEAN, we have open skies.
It's a building block.
It's a building block, yes, exactly.
And actually, you're showing the way with what you were describing, for example, with ASEAN and APEC.
And your comfort level goes up if you're competing just with your neighbors to begin with. I mean, this is what's happened with Indonesia. I mean, we have AirAsia now, which has gotten around the obstacles by setting up an office in Indonesia. So they're, for all purposes, a domestic company, right? Yeah. So then they get overcome that obstacle. So I think that's I think the way forward is, once again, we got to make those economic arguments more stronger so that this reciprocity is reduced. I mean, when I was a trade minister, I could understand very well this reciprocal negotiations. The moment I became the tourism minister, I said, no, not reciprocity. We want more people to come,
The big challenge that goes on in global trade negotiations is that everyone's working away at a multilateral agreement, and then you discover that all the key players are going out the back and creating a whole series of bilateral agreements, which don't necessarily work in the same direction, but then you've got those obstacles as well. So the same thing actually is unfortunately a kind of general phenomenon, isn't it? Whatever you're negotiating.
Yeah, so, I think building blocks, bilateral and regional, is the way to go, because then you can become more comfortable including your domestic airlines. They become more comfortable about competing, and hopefully they're more open to competing multilaterally at some point. Yeah.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister from Portugal, you caught my eye a moment ago.
I would like to raise some issues that can be raised even in an open skies policy. I mean, we all understand how aviation is crucial for our business, tourism. And we know that the transport ministers usually think that the tourism is something that fills the back part of the plane because the business travel is what the flight companies want. So even when we have an open sky policy, some governments, in order to get tourists and to get routes, start subsidizing companies, and which is not a very good way to have a balanced competition. We are also very tempted by low-cost companies, and it's something that I don't want to have in my airports. For instance, in my gems like Madeira Islands or Algarve, totally dominated by low-cost company in an airport. Because as soon as they want to leave, they leave, and the destination is completely out of the scene, at least until it can recover. So there is a concern we have, although in our open skies policy, is to have a balance between low cost and the other operation. And also, if we keep this business model and not trying to understand it, but subsidizing it, until how long can we go with this kind of policies? How much money can we spend on this? Especially if we are in the European Union and we have strict rules on subsidizing companies or giving support to companies, and we have to compete with other destinations that are subsidizing new routes, and we know that flights bring tourists. So I would like to raise these issues of when we speak about liberalization, that means also that we should take care of what we are doing in our government policies in order to bring tourists. And also taxes, just to say, I don't know any single tax that is paid by the companies. All the taxes are paid by the customers. So
I'm very, very keen to get on to taxation, so forgive me, Minister, if I would, however, like to go outside the panel just briefly on, while we're still talking about aviation more generally. If there's anyone from outside the panel who would like to raise a brief point or comment, now is your time. No, well, Honourable Minister from Morocco, but before we move on to taxation.
No, just quickly about like this issue of subsidies. I think that within the open sky policy of European Union, there are subsidies allowed, but I mean, it's an open kind of process, so it's not like excluding. You can't just like subsidize any kind of tour operators. And when you want to create, for example, like some sort of support for a destination, then you need to open that up to all kinds of companies. So it's not like actually you just subsidize anyone you can. But I think subsidies and also support sometimes is good for certain destinations. If you have like an isolated kind of destination, then having some sort of airplane that goes there and then subsidized by the government. And it has been done by European countries. It has been done by other countries as well. I think also when you have a destination which is very good, but you want like so many airline companies to come to that, I think you can open up the process and then you have some sort of co-marketing policies with them. The only problem that happened, or one of the problems that happened with open sky policies, and we have lived that in Morocco, but also other countries also have lived that, is like the big challenge and the big obstacle comes from the national company, because the national company has a monopoly of the airlift and the air industry, and in that sense, it is the one that
Honourable
really.
Minister from Lebanon is nodding because he and I were talking about precisely this issue beforehand. But I'm going to come to you in a moment, Minister. But
right. So you have really to navigate your way through like opening up, but at the same time keeping the national company and then keeping the interests of the national company. You can, I mean, one of the ways you can do that is actually keep the national hub where there is like some sort of relative monopoly of the national company, but develop like regional kinds of hubs, especially if it happens that your national hub, like in Morocco, is Casablanca, which is not totally touristic, but you develop like the regional ones, which is Agadir, which is Marrakesh, which are actually like more touristic. And then in that sense, you can create a balance. It's not an easy balance, but it's a really like very strenuous kind of process that you do when you liberalize, but at the same time, you want to protect the interests of the national company.
Yeah. Sorry, Minister from Lebanon.
Yes, thank you. We discovered something quite important in Lebanon. First of all, pricing. When it comes to competition is just in Europe. When European companies go outside Europe, they forget about competition. And it has nothing to do with the amount of miles you are flying. British Airways from this country flies to Beirut one way on the 10th of November. The price quoted is £1,319. From London to Larnaca, it's only just 90 miles away from Beirut airport, it's £201, right? And to Tel Aviv, all in economy, it's £915, which is a bit further away than Beirut. That is the same airline flying to 3 destinations about 100 miles apart. The story from France is even worse. Air France to Larnaca is 783 euros. To Beirut, it's 2,714 US dollars, one way on the 10th of November. To Tel Aviv, it's $1,023. So, yes, competition is king in Europe. When we go outside Europe, there is no competition at all whatsoever. Our national airline has a duopoly with most of the other national airlines. We have not even one low-cost airline flying to Beirut, which makes probably Beirut among the most expensive, air miles anywhere in the world.
So how do you deal with it? What's to be done? What's to be done?
That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm trying to put more pressure on our national airline, on the transport ministry, and we need the world. I mean, now there isn't a set of rules which only works in Europe. We need, the European companies not to accept, to run a duopoly when it comes to Lebanon. Hence, the price. I think, personally, I am losing somewhere in the region of about 500,000 tourists because of this, the pricing to Lebanon. And this is something not always you can solve it on the national level. Okay. This is something, we really need to debate.
Yeah. Minister, I think we're just going to wrap up a little bit on this. I sense, David, you want to say something on this. Quite briefly, before we move... sorry. Minister from Russia. I'm so sorry. Quite briefly, please.
Да. Я хотел бы поделиться еще одной очень любопытной тенденцией, которая происходит на российском рынке. Если мы говорим о взаимодействии туризма и авиации, в прошлом году 20 российских авиакомпаний перевезли примерно 38 миллионов пассажиров в 70 стран мира. Из этих 38 миллионов, 14 миллионов это были те, которые летали на чартерных рейсах, те, которые загрузку делали туроператоры. В этом году количество туристов по линии туроператора выросло еще на 37%. То есть минимум 40% загрузки авиакомпании это делает туроператорское сообщество. Но происходит интересная тенденция на российском рынке. Крупные туроператоры начинают приобретать собственные авиакомпании. То есть они делают собственную перевозку. И мы видим, что на рынке большей частью конкурентоспособен тот турпродукт, который включает в себя собственное проживание и собственную перевозку. Это та тенденция, которая говорит о тесном сближении все-таки авиабизнеса и туроператорского бизнеса. И последний аспект, который я хотел бы просто резюмировать еще по поводу, возвращаясь к визам, все-таки вот здесь была очень правильная аналогия проведена между визовой политикой и политикой авиакомпаний. Мы сейчас видим, что философия визы меняется. Если раньше виза носила функцию разрешительную, то сейчас она все более начинает носить функцию учетную. И вот это движение от разрешительной к учетной функции, мы это должны всячески поддерживать, потому что вопрос безопасности, вопрос разрешения, он уже не решается визами. Спасибо.
Okay, thank you very much, David.
Just briefly, there's a key theme that's coming out of these initial two conversations, and that is around regional blocks. We're not going to get the Chicago Convention renegotiated anytime soon. We're not going to change the airline ownership regulations anytime soon. But coming out of these first two discussions, it's the focus in ASEAN, in APEC, in some of the Latin American bloc countries, in the EU, where countries can get together and they can put on the table all the issues of trade, security, negotiation, bilaterals, and agree within a bloc of countries how to move forward on all these issues, including air traffic control systems. Just within the EU, you could save €5 billion by consolidating the air traffic control systems. So the way forward to me is clear. It has to be done region by region, whilst at the global level we try and crack some of these bigger issues.
Yep. I think it comes back to the comment I made to the Honourable Minister from Indonesia, that essentially these regional blocks are the building blocks, and the global block, the global structure may very well have to fit on top of that, taking it as an example. Let's move on, because I know that I need to finish in about 15 minutes. And let's come on to the issue of taxation, which, as if to underline its importance, has emerged 2, if not 3 times very solidly in our discourse so far. But I thought that, Taleb, Mr. Secretary General, you put it very well when you said it's entirely legitimate for tourism as a flourishing industry to pay its dues, and for airlines, again, as flourishing companies, mostly anyway, to pay their dues. But how intelligent are our taxes? Who would like to start from the panel on this issue? I know that taxation is a subject that's close. Judging from the breadth of your smile, Honourable Minister for the US Virgin Islands, you want to kick this one off, please.
Well, you know, I did mention it because it is such an oppressive issue for the economic development of our region. We're here in the UK this week. There are millions of dollars being spent here, and then we look at the air passenger duty and what it has done to our region. I just taking the top 3 or 4. You're looking at double-digit declines since the inception of the APD for countries like Barbados, Grenada, Jamaica. I mean, this is an incredible disadvantage to the region. And when you look at it in comparison to what it has done to other areas where you see growth out of the UK, for other markets, and looking at the most tourism-dependent area in the world, the Caribbean, and being banded in a level that's lower than a G8 country. I think that's a major concern for us, and I think that it is something that has to be addressed, as the minister from Lebanon was talking about, and how it affects travel, and there is no mistake that taxation has an impact on the overall cost of travel and also the economies of our countries.
Let me come to the issue that stands, if you like, in its way, straight away, because we don't have an awful lot of time, and that is the issue of the environment. A lot of people would say, actually, it is also legitimate for there to be taxation on excessive energy use, and that is helpful, certainly in terms of fuel. Honourable Minister from South Africa, can environment and aviation be friends?
Yes, I believe so. At the moment, emissions from aviation contribute 3% to global emissions. But it will coexist, and what we understand is that we must also play our role. We cannot go on politically, economically, morally, as we've done in the past. And if we look at aviation, it's certainly about new aircraft design. It is about better infrastructure design, greener airports. But the big game changer will be low carbon kerosene jet fuels, biofuels. That will be the big game changer. And that's going to happen. And the rest of the hospitality industry, the WTTC, committed to a reduction of 50% in emissions by 2035 compared to 2005 levels. So broadly speaking, we are on our way there. But the issue of taxation is a very important issue for us, especially in developing countries. It's not only about taxes. Everybody should pay taxes. It is about unfair taxes. And what we find at the moment, Professor Jeffrey Lipman, I saw him at the back there, he has a very nice way of putting it. He said, it's actually a way, we're talking about the departure taxes in some European countries, it's actually a tax on the non-voting public of other countries. And it's actually true. It's a tax on our green exports. But if we analyze the effect of those taxes, the countries that have those taxes, in our view, are actually losing more than what they get in by way of those taxes. So I believe it's a lose-lose situation for all of us.
Okay, anyone want to come in on this?
We shouldn't dwell on the UK just because we're sitting here, but it is a classic example where the Chancellor of the Exchequer receives £2.8 billion income and the UK is losing 4.2 billion of GDP out of the back door and 90,000 jobs. Never mind the impact on the Caribbean and other locations. But I think it's down to joined up government, which is why I'd like the minister on my left to talk about that, because I think she has a solution in her government to get the linkages between these individual ministries to talk cohesively about our industry and to effect some serious change.
Yes, and I think actually, His Royal Highness, also, perhaps we can hear from both of you, if we can go with you, Honourable Minister.
Well, I guess this is my last intervention, so I'm going to say everything I wanted to say during the panel.
Right.
No, I think what we've been talking about is about an economic sector that we know faces basically, I think, two challenges. One is that it's not vertically integrated, and therefore it is crucial for us to work with aviation in terms of prices, in terms of policies, and the other challenge is that in order for countries to be more competitive, they have to have a coherent touristic policy that involves more ministries than the tourism ministry. And I think that is key, and we've been talking about this since yesterday and in different ways today. What we did in Mexico is that my president created a touristic cabinet where we all sit and talk about tourism from our different perspectives. Because I cannot bring more tourists to Mexico if I do not have an understanding with the transportation minister, or I don't have an understanding with the culture agency that manages archaeological sites. I cannot be competitive if I don't have everyone on the table and we all talk about what our policy should be regarding aviation, regarding infrastructure, regarding airports, because airports are a great example. They are ecosystems that cater to both transportation of goods and people, and they have to work for both. And if we don't talk about it, and if we don't have a permanent coordination mechanism where we can decide policies and set common goals, then we're not going to get anywhere. And talking about building blocks, I think the first building block is national governments. If we cannot talk with our transportation ministers and we cannot talk with our finance ministers in terms of our taxes making us more or less competitive in a world market such as this, then we're not going to get anywhere on the next building block.
Getting rid of the silos. And you've done something, a different structure of government in Saudi Arabia, Your Royal Highness, but you, again, I think you mentioned in passing earlier on, is this, do you have the kind of model whereby you can say to your finance minister, listen, this tax is a hopeless idea, it's killing our tourism, it makes things very difficult, or how does it work? I mean, I'm sure you're not as blunt as that. You're a great diplomat.
I can say that to the finance minister, listen, but he probably won't listen. But like I said, our government is very serious about the point that private sector doesn't make an economy run. Private sector is a partner. And if the government doesn't run very well, the government doesn't facilitate for the private sector. Private sector doesn't work. And in our country, we got very serious in the last 5 years about restructuring how the government operates. And in my case, I was given a mandate to introduce innovation, like all the other ministers. So we introduced a major set of innovations. One of them was, of course, aside from being a board with 13 ministers sitting on the board, which makes my life a lot easier. Also, we've introduced what we call government-to-government agreements. It was something that people just didn't see as being something, I was asked by one of the ministers, are we really different countries? I said, we're worse than different countries between our ministries. We have armies, we have border check patrols, and so on. So these intergovernment agreements have really rescued tourism for Saudi Arabia and rescued a lot of the operations that we do. I also have a joint work committee, standing committee that meets every month with the Minister of Interior and the other ministers. The Minister of Transport is not part of our board, but with this agreement is rated one of the top 3 ministries that respond to our requests.
Good. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. I'm actually going to, I know that we've got some other ministers in the room who are very keen to speak to these issues. If I could call on the Honourable Minister from Croatia, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and thank you all of you for a nice discussion about visas, about air connectivity and taxation. I think that these issues are really, really practically, we can say, affected by all of us. What I can say regarding the first of all the connectivity and about as we have heard the complexity of tourism industry with other sectors. Probably our tourism is represented with more than 15% in our GDP.
Okay.
And the inclusion of all other sectors, especially the traffic sector, the culture sector, all other food sector, are the most important, and the connectivity and the importance and the impact of tourism in our economy is becoming more and more stronger.
In terms of taxation, if I can ask you about that specifically, because that's what we're talking about at the moment. If you, again, it's kind of a variant of the question I just asked His Royal Highness. Are you listened to when you say, we don't want this tax, we're 15% of this economy, and we ought to be a great deal more than 15%, this tax stands in our way? Would you be listened to?
Yes.
Good.
we have to, so I don't like to make discussion much broader, but right these days we are fighting with higher taxation.
So you do have those battles?
Yes, I can feel, and what is the most important and the confirmation what we had from other colleagues here in the room are right, the possibility to cooperate between the ministries is a real big issue, and this is a real, practically each country has their own possibilities, own situations, and I think that also the efficiency is crucial in that direction.
Okay. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Honourable Minister from Egypt, on taxation, please.
I'd like to share in some...
If we can just get a microphone for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I think I would like to intervene with some very quick bullet points on the various issues mentioned here. On the aviation issue, as you have heard, to Lebanon and Morocco, Egypt shared. So in our area, the issue of national carriers sometimes is an impediment for more tourism to flow into the country. In the case of Egypt, it's quite funny to find that the Minister of Aviation has under his authority both Egypt Air and the Civil Aviation Authority. So it is not fair when one authority gives permits to airlines to flow into the country, or give permits in that, and it serves the purpose in a protectionist form for the national carrier. So this issue has to be tackled when we're speaking about aviation. When speaking about taxation, the APT issue, for instance, for Egypt is not that we are not willing to pay, but the distortion and the way it is being handled. In the case of Egypt, I heard a funny comment when I brought the subject to some of the important decision makers in the UK, and I said, sir, we're paying 3 times as more than our neighboring countries, and for only 200 kilometers difference, we're paying 3 times more. And the answer was, why don't you move your capital from Cairo to Alexandria? So, I mean, the idea of distortion in handling the issue of APD should be revisited again, and taxation at large in that respect. So the issue of subsidies, again, it's funny enough that a country like Egypt, which is currently suffering from many challenges, as you may all know, and economically as well, is subsidizing air carriers flying into, because of the business model that we have checked, we found that the subsidies is the benefit of the economy. But the challenges here is that while we're trying and we're permitted to give some subsidies in the form of co-marketing activities, some incentives for airlines to fly into the country, we have at the same time this silos attitude within the government, where I'm told we're giving you facilitation to have visa upon arrival, but let us increase the value of visa. So you have voices that are contradicting at the same time within the government itself. So I think the approach to all these issues, Charles, that you have tackled today has to be divided into two groups. One group is to the country and the international relationship and the national impediments within the country itself for the three issues. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honourable Minister from Egypt. I believe the Honourable Minister from Azerbaijan was keen to speak on this issue.
Thank you very much. These topics are very interesting.
We'll just get the microphone to you.
Thank you.
Competing microphones.
It's my honor to be among all my colleagues discussing these questions, but I would like to note that the matter of taxation is quite gentle matter. We in our country tried at the beginning of the state program of the development of tourism to reduce the taxation of the tourist organizations, and it lasted for 2 years, and it did not give sufficient impact due to the low income of the tourist organization during this time. It was time of somewhere 2001, 2002. But after that, we stopped the implementation of this lower taxation. Then, in 2009, we again rose this matter, and now we're still struggling because we don't have a chance now to prove that in this case, that time it will work. So it's a very gentle matter that when you are coming to the reduction of the taxation, you must be sure that it will not implement the difficulties in future. Coming with the visa regulation, in this case, and aviation matters, I consider that the question which was raised by the Egyptian minister is very important, not only for his country, but for a lot of countries concerned with the civil aviation and the state carrier. In our country it was separated, and it crucially improved the situation. It came that now we have low price charter flights. During the seasonal time we arrange our special flights from Baku to other destinations where people are going. So I think these kind of steps really must be linked to each other, and tourism is the vital matter for aviation, and if aviation administration understands that, then it's not a problem to settle that. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think we need to start wrapping this up because, you know, it's moving towards 1 o'clock when this session finishes. I wonder if I could just ask you all a question. That number that we started with of 1.8 billion tourists in 2030 and what it would take. I mean, who is optimistic? Who is optimistic? Hands up if you think that you as an industry will make it to 1.8 billion tourists in 2030 from... Well, the panelists look very optimistic. Panelists are real professional optimists. Yeah, no. You better, because actually you're in a bit of a minority. So can I, in that case, put your hand up if you think that you as an industry are not going to make it to 1.8 billion international tourists. Well, hang on. You're all voting. You've all got votes out there. Well, in that case, your figures are too low, Talib. If everyone's an optimist, you're going to overshoot, aren't you?
Actually, they are too low.
The numbers are too low, you say. You got the microphone?
Our figures are very conservative.
They are, and they have proven historically to be conservative. I just gave you an example at the beginning of this session. We forecasted 3 minimum, 4 maximum for 2013. We're already in 8 months, 5% over. Now, the second half of the year is usually lower than after the summer, of course, in the northern hemisphere. But we're going to top 4%. And in the last 20 years, our forecast has always been lower than what the reality happened on the ground. This is a tremendous industry, Charles. People are going to continue to travel. No barriers are going to stop them. This has become a human cultural phenomena that characterizes the 21st century. This is, without doubt, the age of travel. Yes. I always say 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, our future generations are going to look back and say, that was the age of travel, where people defied borders. Travel is not anymore an added value to people's life. Yeah. It's not anymore a need, even. It's a human right. Yes. And it's continued to grow. And we have to live with it. The challenge is how to make that growth become a force for good. Because it can go wild. And it can become an activity that would cause much harm to the environment and to the people. And we have that responsibility. But growth is not an option, and it's not a question.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Can anyone else want... Honourable Minister from the Philippines, if you could sort of help us wrap up this debate. Because it seems to me that what we've done here is we've established a lot of principles which everyone really agrees. But at the same time, we know that there are a lot of problems with implementation, with training, that's a very important issue, with coordination, with dialogue, with getting people to allow themselves to be coaxed along roads that they're not really that familiar and comfortable with.
I think very simply, Charles, if you read the optimism around the room, the one thing that nobody will dispute is we are so much better growing in an environment that is competitive than not competitive. I think in ASEAN, for example, we talk about regional building blocks. And when you look at the phenomenon that is ASEAN travel today, you realize that the more we competed, the more the world traveled to Southeast Asia. And I think travel is about that. It's about people sitting in the living room suddenly being captivated by a competitive image. And as long as we compete along those lines, people will continue to travel, and we will knock down those barriers. We are so much better at competition than protection as human beings. That's a fact, and that's why it will grow.
Let me see if I can get somebody else not on the panel to help us for a moment. The Honourable Minister from Albania. I know if I could just actually... Yeah, here we are. Can I ask you, I mean, what's your reaction? You're an optimist. Are you an optimist? Do you think we'll make it to 1.8 billion?
Usually I am. Now I'm just a new minister, just 1 month and a half ago.
Okay, so this is an important...
Urban development.
Well, what's happened here is an important part of your learning process, I hope. And what have you learned? What have you learned from this session, if anything?
In fact, there were some of the issues that are related to the Albanian reality as well, especially about taxation, also about aviation policy. We do have some taxes that are really unfair regarding tourism or for really growing the tourist numbers in Albania. So while we were talking, I was also thinking that this is a challenge that we as a ministry have to face through coordination.
Well, your neighbours in Croatia are facing it.
Yes.
You might have to talk after this.
We have started.
Good, good.
So we have started discussion together since August, and we are trying to learn from their good practices. But also, while what was talked today from all the panelists, I would like to thank you very much, because it was very learning process for me as a new minister, but also learning from their country's perspective in the taxation system, in the aviation policy, and also exchanging experience with all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sven.
Since I'm the sole representative of private enterprise in this panel, I thought it might be appropriate just to sort of give a word of advice. You know, we operate in 196 countries. We recently opened operations in Somalia. So we're truly global. We try and interact with governments in the best way we can, trying to understand these differences and the different approaches. Perhaps one advice is let private enterprise do what private enterprise does best. And the decisions to have hands off, i.e. choose what you don't do as government, is as important as the discussion about what you actually do. And we'd be happy to engage with you wherever you are in discussing how that could be done and how we can together work to stimulate growth in this industry.
David Scousel, thank you.
I think there's a huge amount of optimism in the room and the numbers are going to come, but I don't think anybody's underestimating the challenge that we still have, because we have huge infrastructure build challenges, huge sustainability challenges. We have to manage this growth in an appropriate way. But I think if we take some of these approaches we've been discussing today and we take a regional approach while we attack it at a global level, we have absolutely the right potential between public and private to get this right.
Thank you. Well, I'm afraid at this point, it's now gone 1 o'clock. Thank you all on the panel and you out there for helping us further this discussion. Mr. Secretary General, if I could hand it back to you. Thank you very much indeed for setting the tenor for this debate at the start and for helping us with your outpouring of optimism a moment ago.
No, it's not optimism, it's optorealism. Thank you so much, Charles. Once again, you did a great job, and you'll have to pay the price in the future. So, no, it's been wonderful, everybody. It's been a wonderful, actually, mix. We thought that we were doing a regional balance in trying to choose this balance, but we actually achieved so many other balances. And I've only noticed now that accidentally, even the gender balance was so beautifully displayed today. So thank you all. But during this mix, it was also clear that the concerns are the same. Big country, small country, Asia, Europe, Africa, America, the issues are the same. Some are magnified and some are not. So this is a big lesson to learn. And I'd like to bring in 3 points in conclusion. Point number 1, the priorities that David Scousel has started by stating are the correct priorities, it seems. You've all echoed very, very positively towards the issues, positively in choosing them. Sustainability, the overriding priority, and the 3 other immediate barriers, which are border formalities, taxes, and aviation, seems to have been always echoed as commonly shared concerns. And we have also learned something else, David, today, that they seem to have been also more interconnected than we thought they were. The connection between taxation and aviation, the connection between aviation and border formalities and visas are much stronger than we assumed they were. So that's a very important point. The second, I think, important issue that transpired out of this, it was started from the Minister of Indonesia, and then it was echoed by everybody else, that progress can only be made if we do building blocks. And building blocks start at home, starts within one's own country. It seems like that was also echoed by many, many of the speakers around the circle today. We need to bring not only public-private partnership, which has become a very fashionable slogan, but public-public partnership seems to be a prerequisite to that. So the building block at home, and then the building blocks with your neighbors, and then we can start talking about global issues, but not before that. The third and last but most important observation that I personally came out of this, the tremendous knowledge and intelligence and know-how that the ministers of tourism have started to acquire. I was in your shoes more than 10 years ago. I didn't know half of this because I was not expected to. So this is a very, very important development that has happened in the last 10 years. It is that we have started to assume our responsibilities in a completely different way. Security issues are our business. Aviation is our business. Taxes are our business. 10 years ago, ministers of tourism always said, well, talk to somebody else. They always assumed this, they normally assumed that their task and their job is to promote their country, to smile, to come to fairs, to distribute brochures, and to try to say how good their country is, whether it is or not, and how the issues are on the ground and the realities on the ground didn't matter at that time. Today we're dealing with real issues. The amount of knowledge that was displayed around the circle is tremendous. And in that, really, we feel very, very proud where we have arrived. With that, again, thank you all. Thank you, Simon, particularly WTM and your team for all the efforts that you have done. Thank you, Charles and CNN. You've always been a very faithful and good partner. but most of all, thank you all panelists and very loyal audience. I noticed that if anybody would have left the chair for a minute, the chair would have been taken off. The minister of the state secretary of Germany dared to go to address nature's call for a minute and came back and stood out, and he couldn't find a place to sit again. So thank you again, and see you next year in the 8th Ministerial Roundtable. But before that, I want to also remind you of what Simon have just mentioned. Tonight, we expect you, ministers, to be at the ministerial dinner, kindly hosted by World Travel Market. Thank you so much, and thank you again, Charles.